This is just a real quick follow-up to yesterday's video on discernment, because when you're looking at evidence, you have to know what evidence is and what it isn't, and what deductions you can draw from it. I just happened across this article today, and I thought I'd just do this real quick. It's about a city that has to do with the ancient King David in the Bible. And you look down, you scroll down, yeah, it's the sun, whatever, you can, it's just the first source I saw, and there are others. So, but it had some nice pictures of it and everything. And the thing is, what you see here in this picture, assuming it's of a real place, which I don't have any reason to doubt that right now, is that, we have this picture of a pile of rocks, okay? But they're obviously arranged in a way that is not natural. So the evidence is piles of rocks in a way that they don't occur in nature. This is evidence of people moving the rocks around, okay, and making walls and rooms, and as typical of human civilizations all over the place. So even though the actual evidence is rocks, we use deductive reasoning or inductive reasoning sometimes to figure out what, if any, intelligent design was going on with these rocks. And it seems pretty obvious that there was, since in nature, although you can find piles of rocks, you won't find them arranged into squared off rooms typically. And that this is, common in the area, and there are documents that expected a city to be in this place. And that's the thing about documents. Pay no attention to those ads on the side. Sorry about that. Not much I can do. I don't have ad blocker on the thing I'm sharing. Yeah, let's do that. And then we get the mobile version. Sorry about that. I wasn't even paying attention. I was looking at the rocks. So there we have the issue of it, just illustrating the issue of what evidence is, and the fact that we do have documents that go with it. People dismiss documents unless they like them, like the Gnostic Gospels. They say those documents are legit. Just no rhyme or reason for which documents they pick to be legit. The rule seems to be, if you can call it that a document is legit even if it's old, if it contradicts the Bible. That seems to be the prejudice, is if it's against the Bible or says something that tickles my ears and makes me feel better about myself, then that's legit and the Bible is wrong again. But the problem is the Bible keeps turning out to be right, because city mentioned in the annals of King David in the Old Testament, no, that's not a book name, it's just a way to refer to historical accounts, that the Bible again matches historical evidence. Okay, so the Bible is historically accurate. There's been nothing to contradict it, and evidence to support it. I've even had people years ago who said that were very hostile to Christianity, who admitted this, that you can't disprove the Bible, that when we do have evidence, it seems to support it. So what is evidence? Evidence is stuff you're looking at. Everybody agrees these are rocks arranged in certain ways that don't appear to be natural and that match up with documents that were also written by people. And you put things together. That's circumstantial evidence. Most people would never see justice if we didn't have something other than direct observation, because most crimes don't happen when people are looking. So if somebody, it's like the old game of Clue we used to play. You had to figure out, who did it, how they did it, whether something happened, first of all. You don't go asking questions about who or how until you've determined there's a crime. In the same way, you put things together. You put them together according to a consistent and objective method, which is, we observed these piled up rocks. We've seen other piled up rocks, which were done by humans. We have documents saying there was a human settlement here, and you put all that together. So what it proves is that there was a human settlement here. It doesn't prove which human settlement. And so evidence can only take you so far, but you go with probability then, and that's what all courts of law are, that they're trying to determine who committed a crime and why and what the penalty should be. You have to go with probability. And that's, even then in a court of law, in order to convict somebody, you have to have a unanimous jury. So if everybody looks at this pile of rocks and says, yeah, this was done by humans, it, according to all rationality and anything we regard as evidence, this is evidence, and it matches the Bible. And this, in turn, is yet another of many instances where such evidence supports the Bible. Okay, even though they use words like archaeologists are divided over whether or not biblical figures such as King David and King Solomon ever existed, there's no reason to say, there's nothing to say they did not. Okay, you can't debunk it. But there's evidence to suggest probability that they did exist. And so far, after 2,000 years, no one has found a compelling reason to reject the Bible as historical evidence. Because time after time, cities like this or Jericho or a bunch of other places, or civilizations like the Hittites that were once thought to be mythical because they didn't have other evidence beside the Bible. Well, the Bible turned out to be true again. You can go to a university and study the Hittite language and artifacts. And so those things all combine to make evidence. And then what conclusions you draw should be as objective and consistent as possible. That's why you get various opinions, and people aren't always going to agree. And that's the same with archaeologists. And we know from channels I've mentioned before, like Wise Up, that what archaeologists believe isn't always right either, because they will assume, for example, that every ancient big building was a tomb or a king's chamber or something like that, when in fact, a lot of these things were just the result of the flood. So you have to just weigh everything. There's a lot of things to weigh, and you have to think about it. Just looking at the chat real quick. Yeah, that's the thing. Ron Wyatt, according to many people, some think he was making up stories. Others think, no, he went there, he gave evidence, and he actually went to the places, as opposed to the critics not ever having been there. Some things add up, some don't. But the Bible does say that the ark is in heaven. On the other hand, the Bible talks about the earthly temple having been a model of the heavenly temple, and maybe that's the same with the ark. But the Bible doesn't say the heavenly ark. It doesn't say that the earthly ark was a model of something else. And so, biblically speaking only, I would say, yes, the ark is in heaven. Maybe something else was found that is believed to be the ark, and maybe it turns out not to be. But I don't know. I can't answer that question. I don't have enough compelling evidence either way. But we do have the Bible statement that the ark is in heaven. So that weighs pretty heavily as far as when we're using the Bible as our authority, as Christians should, then we'd have to go with that. But anyway, at least this one professor, and these people were not looking to support the Bible. Okay, not everybody is Ron Wyatt looking for evidence to support the Bible. These are just archaeologists, and they go on to say in the article about these little critters, these mole rats that would bring up dirt from the below to the surface, and it would, that can be examined, and people determine whether there's anything interesting in it that would compel them to do a dig. And that's what happened here. So, and then they give the area of the find is consistent with biblical accounts for the location. And so this, like I said, this is not just the only evidence. This is one of many. Take radiocarbon dating for what it's worth. It's accurate for a certain range of time. It is certainly not accurate for millions of years. And no one can say what beginning conditions were or elements in a thing. But, and when you're talking about carbon, you're talking about life forms. Okay, so you have to be examining something that had been alive. Even then, there's still a lot of presumption. But according to these secular archaeologists, it seemed consistent with the time because of other factors, such as documents in the Bible and otherwise, that would say that it was about 1000 BC or so. So it says here, this is the prejudice, but historians question the use of the Bible as a historical reference because most events mentioned in the text lack historical evidence. That's circular reasoning. That's a good example of circular reasoning. Okay, you can't use it as historical reference because it lacks historical evidence. Well, we've got it right here in this article, and nothing has debunked it. and we have plenty to support it. And they keep finding these pesky things that support the Bible. So it's only prejudice that says, nah, this can't be evidence. It's just like with Egyptology. They assume that a Hebrew presence in Egypt just can't be the time that the Bible says, because they don't want to believe the Bible is true. So they're prejudiced against it, just as people say that Christians are prejudiced in favor of it. Okay, that door swings both ways. So you have to take evidence to where it will let you go, and you have to take a lot of it, and you have to compare different kinds of evidence. Okay, so you always have to ask, is this consistent evidence, and what is it evidence of? And that's the interpretation part we have to be careful about. But they go on to say the structure is excavated almost in its entirety, large courtroom, rooms on 3 sides, hundreds of artifacts, including a wide range of pottery vessels, loom weights, metal objects, botanical remains, that's where the carbon dating comes in, plant remains, arrowheads, many arrowheads, evidence of the battle which accompanied the conquest of the site by the Assyrians. And then they go on to say David's myth. They assume it's a myth. They call it David's myth. Okay? So these people are not prejudiced in favor of the Bible. That much is clear. But it matches what the Bible said should be there. Okay? So mainly, I just wanted to go over the fact that we have to be aware that there is evidence that supports the Bible. There is no evidence that contradicts it, and that this keeps happening. So we can have confidence in the Bible as a historical record, at least as much as any other. And remember the fact also that the Bible was not meant to cover the entire world's history of every, rise and fall of empires. It was concerned with the area focused around Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the absolute key to the Bible. So consider the scope of what the Bible's purpose was. I've gone over that in my videos before. But consider also that in the news, every once in a while, you're not going to see this big, promoted on all over the place, because people don't want there to be evidence for the Bible. And the same thing goes with documents. I heard somebody today going on and on about missing books of the Bible. And I'm like, well, you can't know what's missing until you have an agreed upon authoritative list of what should have been there. Okay, you can't say something was taken out if you don't know the original, and you can't prove it. And they couldn't prove it. They didn't even try. And yet they said there are missing books, that there should be more than the 66 books of the Bible. And even then, the number of books varies according to culture, as far as, some are combined, like 1st and 2nd Kings. There might not necessarily be different books in other areas of the world, or just like 1st and 2nd Samuel and all these things. They may even have some different reference names. But the point is that the material is there. And the thing is that the Bible is assembled on the basis of the quality of the people writing it, and that it was preserved at the cost of people's life in many cases. And every historical record is going to have a focus and an alleged preference or prejudice. So people who are against the Bible are every bit as prejudiced and blind to evidence as they allege that is true about Christians and Jews, especially Christians. So the thing is that when somebody says Gospel of Thomas should have been in the Bible, or the Book of Enoch, or various other things, or the Apocrypha, that's still does not say that the 66 of the Western world is necessarily bad or wrong, or that there was some nefarious plot to leave out things that we needed to know. Okay? The fact is that Jesus and the apostles never quoted outside of those 66 books. Of course, we're talking about the 39 of the Old Testament when the New Testament quotes it, because the New Testament was being written. So it would have been only looking at the 39 books of the Old Testament. And those books were not in question. And even though the Septuagint that they were quoting from did include some apocryphal books, they never quoted from them. And that's a big deal when it comes to deciding for Christians what should have been in the Old Testament. Did the New Testament reference it? Now, the New Testament does reference Enoch. But it doesn't reference the book of Enoch. Okay, so Enoch was a historical figure, the seventh from Adam, but it doesn't say that the book of Enoch, or especially the second and third ones, which I've read all three of them, and the second and third are just not the same quality at all, and much more mystical, and um, I just don't take them seriously. But Enoch and some of the apocryphal books, I think, have historical value. Whether they should be in the Bible is a different question. And whether anybody had a nefarious reason for keeping something out of the Bible canon is something that the accusers, the people who make those statements, need to provide evidence for. Okay? And what will be accepted as evidence? What they produce? It's going to be documents for the most part. And yet these same people who want to pretend that there are certain things missing from the Bible canon would not accept the evidence we give in response. Okay, so there's double standards all over the place. But the point of this article that I wanted to highlight is that there is evidence that continues to be discovered to support the Bible and its timeline and its accounts, and none to refute it. Let's see, another comment about pagans celebrate the May Queen. Yeah, there's all sorts of pagan celebrations. And if you read the history of the early centuries after the apostles died, you will see eventually that the persecution-weary church was finally broken down to the point where they were willing to compromise and be a state religion, and that's where everything went wrong, and things got blended together because, as one historian put it, if the Romans couldn't add Christ to their pantheon, they would add the pantheon to Christ. They would infiltrate the church and just rename things, and that's what happened. So we have to keep that separate from the actual Bible itself and what the Bible teaches, because what came after it was, in many cases, in a lot of cases, antagonistic to the Bible. Let's see, next thing in the chat, Nephilim skeletons, not just in South America either. There's a lot of hiding. There's suspicions of hidden skeletons in the vast reaches of the Smithsonian Institute, and all sorts of things like that. The Bible does mention giants. The Nephilim were the giants, the hybrid offspring of the fallen angels and humans. And that's Genesis 6. So that's entirely biblical. Whether they were you get into the giant trees and all that. The thing is, yeah, there's the pre-flood world was much different. But on the other hand, saying that every mountain is a giant is, in my opinion, without rational and objective and consistent evidence to support it. Just because something looks like something doesn't make it an actual giant. And as I've said before, why is it that these giants that are the size of mountains seem to always die in a nice pose where they're pointing straight up or straight out, horizontal or vertical? They didn't seem to, it's just like with the plateaus and mesas as tree trunks. They lack any other evidence of a tree besides appearances. Nobody has discovered a root system. Nobody has seen any big logs being dragged away. Why did they always cut them off so very straight without any, jaggedness? And where's the branches? Where's the evidence that these were used elsewhere? There's just too many pieces of missing evidence that should be there if these were cut down trees. But I've been over that before. And the thing is that, if the Bible says there were giants, it doesn't say how tall all of them were, then we don't know. And it doesn't talk about the size of vegetation. So it's all speculation. And here again, when it comes to evidence, here I'm looking at a pile of rocks that says there was a civilization of humans here, and it's consistent with the Bible. But other people who believe that mountains were giants, and that the Bible must somehow be wrong because of that, even though it's just not a dire contradiction, they will look at this pile of rocks and go, no, that's not evidence of the Bible. So they're very selective, not objective, not consistent when it comes to interpreting evidence. And that's the point. Let's see. Comment in the chat that if you don't know what the harpazo is, that's the Greek word for the snatching up that Paul uses in describing an event called by its Latin name, the rapture, which is an anglicized version of the Latin word. Noahide laws are, of course, the situation of very simple laws that were given to Noah after he got off the ark after the flood, where God says, if a human or an animal kills a person, that human or animal must die in response, and that God blessed Noah and gave him animals for food. Those are pretty much it. But who knows what laws will be pushed after the rapture? And again, I must express my chagrin at people who don't know the Bible at all trying to make pronouncements about the rapture. That's ludicrous. I mean, and they have large followings, and they are supposedly a science channel, but they go on and on about the Bible, and then don't like it that there are Christians who object to what they say. But what are you going to do? Anyway, the point is that people who haven't studied the Bible, especially prophecy, especially the rapture and the writings of Paul, shouldn't go around talking about it, but they're going to anyway. Anyhow, the rapture is a real thing described in the Bible. The question is when, not whether. And I believe that this is the departure of the church. Paul also described it as the departure, which most people misinterpret as the apostasy, as in a falling away from faith. They call it the great falling away. But apostasy is, as I've mentioned before, a transliteration of the Greek word apostasia, which simply means to stand apart from. And context tells you what it's being applied to. And that context where Paul uses it is not false teaching. It's the day of the Lord. So prophecy. And so the apostasia, in the context of the day of the Lord, is a departure of the church. And it was rendered in English as the departure before the King James. So, and the King James, as you know, in the other videos I've been posting, it's had a lot of deliberate non-translations of words for various reasons. But the fact is that there will be a departure, and I believe that's the reason the world seems to keep running in circles like a holding pattern, waiting for permission to move on to this great cataclysm and upheaval and a new world order. They can't do it while the church is here. And the world at this point would be very happy to be rid of us. So it's a convergence of events that makes the departure that much more sure to be happening soon. But I don't set dates. I don't believe in setting dates. I don't listen to the dreams and visions about setting dates because they've always been wrong. It's been going on for decades at least. And the thing is to look at the Bible for these things. And it says, here's the general conditions to look for. The signs are for Israel for the day of the Lord, for the tribulation. So if we're seeing that, the shadows of those things, the chess pieces in place, the actors in the wings, then we know that our departure must be near, because those things, the show can't start while we're here. So this is what, I see in the Bible. That the rapture teaching is not something I get from any place else. So our arguments for trying to smear the character of people who talked about it in years past are going to be worthless with me, because I just say, look, show me something in the Bible, and I see the rapture there. And so I don't believe that the world events that are about to happen, that everybody sees something is coming, I don't think they can happen really in high gear until the church is gone, until we're snatched away, as the word harpazo means. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens after we're gone, but we're going to be here to see it, not Christians. And it doesn't matter if you're a good or a bad Christian. If you're truly saved, if you have the Holy Spirit and you trust Jesus to save you, reconcile you to God, be adopted as a child, you will be snatched, and you won't have anything to say about it. It will happen when it happens, and Jesus is not touching the earth. And this, I've talked about this before, but why not again? The thing is that if we understand the difference between Israel and the church, it makes a lot of things more clear. We are not Israel. We are not spiritual Israel. Spiritual Israel is believing Israel, the Israel who has accepted Jesus as Messiah. But right now, those are Christians too, just like Gentiles who accept that Jesus rose from the dead are Christians. So the thing is that the Bible prophecy is not something to be taken lightly. We have all those things going on in Syria. Netanyahu just declared the other day that Iran was lying about nukes. Who cares what the reasons are? The thing is that that the Bible predicts these things. And in my opinion, the next event for Israel in their Bible prophecy is the destruction of Damascus, to where only animals graze there. There are no humans. Well, there's still plenty of humans there, even though it's in ruins. It says that there will be no people there. So that, in my opinion, is the next event to look for. Whether we'll be here for that or not, no one can say for sure, but my opinion, we won't be. That's one of those things that can't happen till we're gone. And that our departure will be the trigger for a lot of upheaval. It will be the sign that the unbelievers were waiting for, the powers that be, so-called, they were waiting for to kick their New World Order into high gear. So here again, evidence of the Bible being true. And I've sent people to go look at a book called Daniel in the Lion's Den, because Daniel was probably the most uncannily accurate prophet, as historically, hundreds of years before a succession of empires that nobody knew about. He predicted them. And Daniel in the Critic's Den is a book showing that the critics who want to post-date Daniel don't have a leg to stand on. Daniel predicted in order the empires. The first one was one he was in, run by Nebuchadnezzar of the Empire of Babylon. And then after that was the Medes and the Persians. And then after that was the Greek Empire, Alexander the Great. And then after that, the Roman. And everything Daniel said has transpired. The last major prophecy with Daniel 9, of course, there are, I think, 12 chapters in Daniel, and getting into 11 talks about the very end of time and talks about what the person we commonly call the Antichrist. But 69 of the 70 weeks of years that Daniel prophesied happened. They ended at the death of Jesus, because those 69th week end when he died. And I'm not going to get into preterism and all that crap. I've done that before. And so 7 years remain. That will be the tribulation, and that is for Israel. The first 69 were for Israel. The 70th will also be for Israel. And it even says in Daniel 9, your people, your holy city, Jerusalem, Israel, the temple. That's what it all centers on. So since we know that the Bible is accurate historically, and we know that it has accurate prophecy, then that which remains will certainly happen as the Bible says it will happen. So that's, kind of my motivation for showing this, is not just to say the Bible can be trusted, the Bible is accurate, but to say what it predicts is also accurate. And when we see all this turmoil centered around Iran and Syria and all the chess pieces in place, Christians especially need to wake up and get busy doing whatever God has tasked them to do, because the time is short. And you don't want to be snatched in the middle of either beating your fellow servants, I don't know, for reasons like believing in the pre-trib rapture, for example, beating your fellow servants, or not having done what you were told to do and given time to do. You don't want to be caught that way. So if you're a Christian, get busy. And if you're not, pay attention, because things are going to get very much worse. And Jesus described the time coming as a time that things have never been that bad before and will never be that bad again. So if you think things have been bad, you ain't seen nothing yet. That's what the Bible's promising. And discoveries like these, the site that had to do with King David, are just simply more evidence that the Bible is accurate and can be trusted. So when people tell you there's books missing, tell them to, if they would reject evidence like this and paperwork, documents that support the Bible, then they need to supply, a reason why they have this double standard. And they need to put their evidence under the same degree of scrutiny that they've put the Bible. But they aren't going to do that. People just might like to make claims and believe what they want to believe. And sometimes they do it to make other Christians look bad. But the Apostle Paul said, there are people who go around trying to stir up trouble for me while I'm stuck here in prison for preaching the gospel. And they try to make a profit, or they try to draw away disciples to themselves from me. And he says, as long as they teach the truth, that's fine. Just let them teach the truth. But, God will deal with their motives later. Just as God will deal with the people who will try to stir up trouble for us so-called Bible literalists, which is always used as a pejorative. It's just something that they despise us for, taking the Bible literally. But why not? We got evidence like this. We've got lots more evidence. We got plenty of evidence, and we have document evidence. We have testimony evidence. But it's never good enough for people who are prejudiced against the Bible, especially taking it literally. But I just wanted to do this real quick to show that, this is a current news item that you can look up, and it supports the Bible. It does not contradict the Bible. And it's only the blindest prejudice, as you can see in some of these comments down here, that people will say, no, this is not accurate. Oh, where'd those comments go? Nothing. This is these. I hate that they have all these bad pictures in here that you can't read. I don't know where they went, but we'll just stop sharing that because I can't find the comments. But you can go there to, find an article on any of these things that, that you see in the news. It's bound to be in more than one place. And for some reason, it won't even show. Well, let's show my screen. How about that? Won't even show my icon right now. I don't know. At least it wasn't. Yeah, it's optical illusion I got on my screen right now. Anyway, oh, there it goes. It finally showed it. I don't know what was up with that. But if you're a Christian, have confidence in the Bible and don't let people who arbitrarily accept some things as evidence and not other things tell you what to believe. Okay. So, and I know there are people who's going to take snippets or, some of the things that were on the screen I was sharing and cherry pick and spread bad things, but that's what people do. And there are people who, well, when it comes to evidence, because we are still talking about evidence, there are people who will only believe one side of a story. But we have Proverbs 18:17, for example, that says the first person to speak always seems right until they're cross-examined, and people don't go to the source and get the other side of the story. So, what are you going to do? But anyway, that's all I have for today. For all 5 of you that have been watching, or at least watch for a little bit. So, have a good day, and we'll see you another time.